Welcome to another episode of the Creative Power Hour. I'm your host, Marcus Whitney, and today our guest is the mastermind, Matt Bodnar.
Ooh, I like that. I didn't know if I was going to get a nickname or not.
You get a nickname.
That's amazing.
Yes,
that's awesome.
Welcome to the show, bro.
Dude, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
I'm super excited.
Okay, so for the listeners or viewers, I've known Matt for several years now, but we got reconnected here recently, largely because his podcast is one of my favorite podcasts, period. So before we even dig in, The Science of Success, like, you can actually stop listening to this, go subscribe. It's amazing. I'm getting your pitch out of the way right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's so good. I listen to it on runs. It really does change my life. Okay, now, having said that,
you're very kind.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And you know how the show works, origin story.
Yes.
Let's hear yours.
All right, so we're going to go, we'll start at the very beginning. I was born in Birmingham, Birmingham, Alabama, but I didn't really spend a lot of time there as a kid. We moved to Colorado when I was 5. And so I had a kind of and we'll get into this a little bit more, but I had a very unique upbringing that I think shaped the way I think about a lot of stuff. And I lived in Colorado. We lived in Breckenridge, so I lived out in the woods, basically.
Wow.
And my dad traveled a lot, worked a lot, and it was really me and my mom out in this house in the wilderness, basically, which was pretty interesting. And she was one of the things I have to give her credit for. And as a parent, I don't know that I could even be as kind of free, I don't know the right term, like freewheeling or just low maintenance in terms of parenting style. Like, she would let me do stuff that I would think now as a parent is like crazy. Like, we lived right next to a national forest, and when I was 8 years old, I would go out in the woods for 6 hours. You know what I mean? And I would just be like, "Hey, Mom, I'll see you later." And I'd like go walk through the woods, like swim through swamps, like play, crawl, like be outside for hours and hours at a time, completely by myself as a 10-year-old. And that really was a very interesting experience for me, and I think gave me a lot of self-confidence and freedom at like a subconscious level that helped shape me. But anyway, so that was part of it. And then the other really weird thing about my early childhood is that my parents would move to Florida for 3 months a year.
Okay.
And take me with them. And I was in school in Colorado, but they would pull me out of school. And so I would be homeschooled by my mom for basically January, February, March of every year. And she had been a teacher, but when she homeschooled me, it was very different, obviously, than school. And there's a really funny stat. I think it's in Connecticut, and different states have different metrics for this. But in Connecticut, I think it's 1 hour a day of homeschool is the equivalent of a full school day, right? And so you think about the fact that in school they're teaching to, in many cases, like the slowest person in the class or whatever. And so if you have one-on-one tutelage, you get much higher exponential returns, right? And so there was this weird experience where my mom and I would do 3 to 5 hours a week of schoolwork, and I would come back and be ahead of the class on everything, which was crazy. But and I didn't even think about it for years, but then I think it really taught me in many ways the same lesson of the 4-hour work week, or the stuff that Tim Ferriss teaches of there's not necessarily a linear relationship between input and output, and that you don't have to follow the traditional path to get better results or exponential results. And so those were two kind of transformative things in my childhood. And then my father got a job here in Nashville, and so we moved to Nashville when I was in 5th grade. Grew up here, went to high school, all that. And I went to MBA, and then I went to University of Richmond for undergrad. And one of I would say the most transformative, and we're going deep here, maybe I went too far back, but I'm just
This is amazing.
Telling the story. The most transformative experience of my high school career was being a policy debater. And I debated all 4 years of high school, and then I debated freshman year of college as well. And policy debate, I would say if you stacked up every single thing I learned from all of high school, it would be maybe this much, and debate would be, through the ceiling, beyond the roof. I mean, I am a huge advocate of debate as a skill set, and I think it teaches you everything you need to be successful in life, whereas school in many ways is structured. It doesn't teach you most of those things. They teach you a lot of facts, but they don't teach you. Debate teaches you how to read, how to think, how to argue, how to break apart an argument, how to research something in depth, how to speak, how to present ideas. I mean, these are incredibly valuable skills that are that transfer to anything that you're doing, right?
And strategy, positioning.
Yeah, all of that, right? And debate teaches it in a framework where it's like fun and really addictive.
Yeah.
And you get sucked into it. And I remember I would literally sit in class and I would just work on debate stuff. I wouldn't even have my book out. I would just be like putting together debate files in the middle of any other class because I'd be like, I don't care at all about any of this stuff. I only care about debate. And so debate was the huge impact for me and hugely transformational. And I would say that was probably the seminal experience of my high school career.
Wow.
You know, I was a big nerd. Like I played a lot of video games and I debated, and that's pretty much all I did. And I read a lot. Debate forces you to read because you're reading through books and books and books and pulling out, you know, quotes and pieces of evidence and so forth. And that was a huge thing which shaped initially what I thought was going to be my career. I thought I would be a lawyer. And so when I went to college, I took poli-sci, majored in poli-sci, and was just on the law track, which a lot of debaters do, a lot of debate people do. And for some reason, every single person that I talked to that went to law school was like, don't go to law school. I don't know why, but I just got that advice from a dozen people. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to go to law school. What else am I going to do? And being a 20-year-old kid who was a poli-sci major who didn't really know that much, I was like, what's the coolest sounding thing I can do? And so I was like, oh, Wall Street, right? I would get a job on Wall Street.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about finance, right? I mean, I'm much more competent, but, you know, I could play around with a spreadsheet, but like I didn't know anything. And I was a poli-sci major. And so I set my sights. I was like, I'm going to figure out how to get a job on Wall Street. And I went to Amazon, which was barely existed at that time.
All right, what year is this? I'm gonna rewind this whole story and pick apart certain things.
Tell me if you want me to stop.
No. This is awesome. This is awesome. But what year are we at right now?
This is 2006.
Okay, great.
Maybe 2007, 2006.
Okay.
The winter of 2006, I would say.
Amazon's a thing, but it's not
a thing.
It's not the juggernaut.
I got a Kindle like a year or two after that, and it was like the big boxy.
Right.
Like, I was like, oh my God, I got this thing called a Kindle. Right. Like, it's going to be so cool.
But like Borders had closed by then.
Probably,
you're right. Like Amazon had kind of like...
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. But it wasn't like they only sold books, or
Right.
maybe they sold like some consumer electronics and stuff. But anyway, so I got all these. I brought like 25 books on Amazon.
Okay.
Everything from Business 101 to books about marketing, books about finance, and I was like, I'm going to teach myself everything I can about business so that I can get an internship on Wall Street. And so I bought all these books, and I
love this.
That summer after my sophomore year of college into the first semester of my junior year, I lived and studied in China. And that gave me this huge opportunity. I literally had a suitcase that was almost completely books that I brought with me because I was flying. I mean, the flights are long and there's tons of travel and all this stuff. And so I gave myself a mini MBA in business just out of a suitcase, basically, while I was living in China. And that was how I taught myself all the stuff that I used to then get an internship at Goldman Sachs and then work there for a number of years. And then I moved to Nashville after working at Goldman in New York for a couple of years in 2011. And so I can keep going from there. That's just the beginning of the Nashville story, but I told you a lot of stuff already.
Let's go back to you and your mom in Colorado. Okay. So I thought I knew where you were going to go in terms of parenting then versus parenting now, and I think to a degree there's definitely something that is about the era, right? You know what I mean? Back then, you know, I mean, I spent a lot of my summers on a farm in a small town outside of Richmond called Goochland that now is not so far away. It used to be an hour away. Now it's like 15 minutes away as Richmond has expanded. Mm-hmm. But, you know, my mom's side of the family has a family farm there. And, you know, we would leave early in the day. And I was probably 8-10 years old, you know. Yeah. Leave early in the day and like come back at dark and just be sort of all over the place. Yeah. All over the place. But I have to, like, were you by yourself or did you have other family members? I
was completely by myself.
See, that's the difference. Okay, so for me, it was me and my cousins. And so, you know, there was only so much trouble we would get into. And if something happened to one of us, the other one would run back to the house. And usually we were like running back to tell on each other. Yeah. Like you were out there by yourself. Yeah.
It was like some Bear Grylls stuff.
Seriously, man. And I was having a conversation with someone earlier today. It was an interview where just talking about like creativity and why I like to do it. And one of the things I thought about that I hadn't thought about in a long time was I grew up an only child. I have I have half sisters
I'm the same
and
way.
a half brother, but I grew up an only child. And so, when you play by yourself, you have to be both sides. You have to be you and your imaginary friend. And so you get real comfortable with this conversation in your own head that is not necessarily about, it's not like an anxiety conversation. It's like an entertainment, inquisitive curiosity conversation, right?
I could literally, and this is to my wife's chagrin, because I could literally be by myself for 4 days in a row and not feel lonely at all. Like, I could entertain myself for pretty much an infinite amount of time.
We are the same person in that respect. My wife has a brother, and so like if I don't say something to her, she is so upset with me. But I'm just like in my own little world, and I love it there.
Yeah, we call it me time at my house. I'm like, I need like a certain quotient of me time, or I start to get grumpy. You know what I mean? I just have to be by myself for a little while.
So take me back to the time in the forest. Like, what were you doing out there?
Probably the thing I did the most was I was obsessed with the military. So I would dress up in fatigues, and I had the compass and a flashlight and all kinds of stuff, and I would like crawl through the woods and pretend that I was in the Army, basically.
Awesome.
And it was fun. I mean, it was
and you weren't scared.
I'm no fear at all.
Right.
I mean, now I would be scared.
Right.
Right.
But like,
no
you didn't
fear.
know to be
No,
afraid.
I wasn't
It was
afraid
just
of
like
bears.
adventure.
I just thought it was awesome. And that's what I'm saying. At the time, it felt totally fun and normal. And then in hindsight, I'm like, man, my mom was like pretty bold to just let me go run around in the forest for hours on end.
So then the second thing I want to jump into is the homeschooling.
Yep.
And I have a hunch, but this could be completely wrong. I've got you've got kids, right? But they're
young kids.
They're young.
Yeah.
I've got a 20 and an 18-year-old. So I've like gone through working with the school system, right? And when you were saying that your mom got to homeschool you just kind of every year for 3 months, I think about trying to do that with Metro Public Schools or something. Like that would just be a disaster. And I sort of feel like Colorado is probably
more chill
about stuff like that.
And it was also in the early 90s, so it was very different. I mean, not as much red tape and bureaucracy.
Right. But that is amazing. So what did you do outside of the 1 to 2 hours of school with your mom during those 3 months? Do you remember what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was similar to the stuff I was doing in Colorado in some ways. I would play in nature. I would go play in the ocean. I would play in the sand, because we're in Florida. So I would play in the water. I would like run around the neighborhood. I was really into Legos. Legos was one of the biggest memories I have of my childhood. Just tons and tons of Legos and building things, and had a whole town that I built at one point.
Wow.
And, I just like some of my happiest childhood memories are like Cartoon Network on in the background, and like just playing with like a huge spread of Legos and just building all kinds of stuff. And I think that gave me or taught me in some form or fashion to be a builder, to be a creator, to just want to create things for the sake of trying it out and playing and experimenting.
What was your relationship like with your father? Because he was very busy. He was.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, didn't really. I mean, not in a negative sense, but just we really didn't have much of a relationship until I got much older.
Right.
Like, we have more of a relationship now than we ever had when I was growing up.
Yeah. That's also similar for me. My dad, he didn't travel a lot, but he worked nights. He was a correctional officer, and then he worked at the post office. Both jobs, he worked night shifts. So that means he slept during the day.
Yep.
So like he was in the house, but he was sleeping.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, same. And as I got older and I had kids, and we had so much more to relate about.
Yep. Totally.
The relationship changed dramatically. That's super interesting. What did you know about your dad?
I knew that he worked really hard.
Yeah.
And
did you know anything about what he was doing?
I mean, ish. You know what I mean? I mean, I knew he was in business. I knew he was in the restaurant industry. But as a kid, you don't really have any context.
There's no context.
Right? So you just, everything, whatever your family dynamic is just the way things are.
Yeah.
Until you become a teenager, or maybe even until you're older than that, and you start to realize, oh, everybody has like a different family dynamic, and their parents don't always do that, and maybe they're different this way or that way or whatever, and you realize that there's this huge, pretty infinite array of different ways that things could be configured.
Yeah.
And so that was it was like water, right? As David Foster Wallace says, like, that's just how things were. And I never, as a 10-year-old, never really thought much about why they were that way.
Yep. I would imagine even more so if a lot of his work required him to travel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing if if he's working and he's around, because maybe there would be more context, because maybe people would be around the house and things like that. But if there's like a ton of travel,
and I guess during a lot of the formative years of my childhood when we lived in Colorado, he didn't have any business interest in Colorado at all. So he would drive to Denver every Monday morning or most Monday mornings and fly to New York for most of the time. And he had a ton of stuff he was doing in New York. So I didn't see it.
Yeah,
you know
home was literally home for him.
Yeah.
Like, and so that, which is kind of cool. Like
I
when he was
never
there.
went to the office as a kid.
Yeah. Interesting. So what brought you all as a family to Nashville?
So he got a job in Nashville when I was in 5th grade, and we moved here.
Okay.
And so
moved for work.
Yeah. Been here ever since. I mean, obviously I went to college and lived in New York for a while, but my family basically has been here since the late 90s.
Got it. And okay, we can hop to Goldman Sachs now.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's talk about your Goldman Sachs experience. What kind of position did you have there? And
so I was an analyst on the interest rate derivatives desk. Which is, interest rate derivatives sound really complicated, but they're pretty straightforward.
Okay.
It's basically a product that lets you hedge interest rate risk, which is a fancy way of saying you can bet on whether interest rates go up or down. Right. And so interest rates are the most macroeconomic thing you can kind of bet on. If you have a spectrum of in the fixed income world, or in kind of the securities world broadly, and on Wall Street, you go from sort of micro to macro. Like the most micro is a specific company. Right. So you can bet on just this company doing really well, or you can go all the way out to betting on an entire country's economy or the world economy or whatever. And so interest rates are they're like the most macro thing, basically. So they're way on the macro side of the product. So we were looking at money flows and all, jobs reports and all kinds of very macroeconomic data, not really digging into, never looking at specific companies or anything like that. But it was a really cool experience. I mean, I learned a tremendous amount. It was pretty grueling and pretty intense, and there was a lot of hazing and that kind of thing. But it was something that I'm really glad that I did, but I wouldn't want to necessarily do it again, if that makes sense.
What did success look like for you? Like, how were you compensated?
At Goldman?
Yeah.
I was pretty low on the totem pole when I was there, right? I was just out of college, and I was there for a couple years. And so success is, on my team, success was measured in something called gross credits.
Okay.
And gross credits is basically when a client does business with the firm, you get a credit for a percentage of the transaction that they executed.
Okay.
Right? And so I forget the exact numbers, but the sales, I was on a sales team in the beginning, and the first sales team that I was on was me and 2 women, and they were like either the heaviest hitters on you have a desk, which is probably 30 people, and then within the desk they had these things called pods. And the pods are 1 to 5 people.
Yep.
And so they were either the heaviest hitting pod or the second biggest pod. And I think they had $75 million of gross credits attributable to the 2 of them.
Yeah.
Right. And so one was kind of the senior partner, basically, and one was the junior person, and I was the person below them that was kind of doing all the busy work and that kind of stuff. And so my, 3 months out of college, because we had training and everything, and then we started in the fall, and basically by the end of the year they had done $75 million worth of business. Like, they personally were responsible for $75 million of revenue, and I was like, man, that's pretty insane. Like, just you can't even really think about those numbers. And so I mean, as the low person on the totem pole, I wasn't driving those business relationships, right? I was picking up the phone when they were doing another trade, or I was booking trades and that kind of stuff. Very very low level things. But I would say it was really about how much, I mean, and this is one of the reasons I left ultimately. A lot of, I think, in the desk I was in, the compensation structure, everything, most of it was really politics driven, I would say. Like, compensation was somewhat a function of what you did, but it was mostly a function of what you appeared to do and how your relationships were, and who liked you and who didn't, and whose side you were on. And I could, even as a 22-year-old, I could see a lot of those dynamics and I wasn't enmeshed in them, but I could see them playing out. And really, I looked at the people who had been successful, right? And I said, okay, so let's say I stay here for 10 years. I'm going to grow up to be one of these people. There's somebody who's 35 who is making a lot of money from a on paper perspective, but they live in New York, so 50% of it lumped off from income taxes.
Right.
The cost of living is astronomical. Like, I mean, there's people easily people making over $1 million a year in gross income that are almost living paycheck to paycheck, or if not, they're with their glamorous Instagram trips that they're taking and stuff, they're not really saving anything. They're not really creating any wealth.
Right.
And so I looked at that lifestyle and I was like, I could be on this slow grinding treadmill where I know exactly what the future looks like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And my fate is essentially determined by how well I can play the political game. And if I fall out of favor with somebody, or something happens that's out of my control, or for whatever reason, my boss or my boss's boss or some influential person doesn't like me, my earning potential in my career can be sabotaged. I didn't like any of that. So I wanted to get into a place where I could control my destiny a little bit more. And so that's why I moved back to Nashville and started doing more entrepreneurial stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that. What was that like? What was the reentry to Nashville like? Because 2006, 2007 is when you started this whole reading thing. You went to China, then you went to Goldman Sachs. 3 years you did that?
2 years, yeah. 2 years and change, basically.
2 years and change. Okay, so we're past 2010, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
when
so
you come home.
I moved back here in 2011, basically.
2011. Okay, so after the flood.
Yeah,
So
I missed the flood. My parents lived here, but I missed the flood.
Yeah. So you weren't here for that, but you were here for the rebuild, effectively.
Yeah,
and
I came here in fall. It was like September 1st, 2011 was basically.
Yeah. We were still rebuilding.
Yeah.
Very much. Like, I don't know if the symphony was even open by then.
It may not have been.
Yeah, I don't know. Or the Opry. I think it took like 18 to 24 months to reopen.
I was like super, super heads down for the first probably month or two. Really the first like 6 to 8 months. I didn't look up, and there's a thing, actually, it's funny. So you have the freshman 15 in college.
Yeah.
Right? And then at Goldman, they called it the Goldman 20, right? Which is like when you go to Goldman, like you're just stationary and you're sitting there and you're eating like chicken wings and whatever, and you put on a bunch of weight. So I had kind of bulked up at Goldman. One of the VPs that I worked with, who's a great guy, we're still buddies, he like bought me a personal trainer and was like, dude, you got to get in shape. So I lost a little bit of weight, but I was still, somewhat heavy. And then I moved back to Nashville and started doing a bunch of stuff in the restaurant business, and I blew up.
Wow.
At my peak, I was about 215, and so to give you a sense, today I weighed myself this morning. I was 165 pounds.
Yeah, no, dude.
So that's like what is that? 40 pounds, 50 pounds?
I mean, I'm very close to 215. That's kind of my target walk around.
And there was no muscle in that body.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so you came back and you went into restaurants.
Yep.
And the reason for that is?
So my family had been in the restaurant business forever, right? My dad was a restaurateur and had done a bunch of restaurant stuff. That's why he'd originally come back to Nashville. And then he had invested in a couple different restaurant brands, and my brother had started kind of dabbling in that stuff. And when I was at Goldman, whenever I'd come home for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, it was always really fun to go out to a construction site or kind of see what they were doing and dabble in it. And I'd actually invested in a number of their projects when I was up in New York.
Okay.
And wasn't super involved in them, but I put some capital into it.
Right.
And basically, they recruited me really hard, and they were like, hey, come back, get involved. We just started this thing called Fresh Hospitality, and we're getting off the ground, and you could add a lot of value, and it'd be really fun, and blah, blah, blah. So I ended up agreeing, and there's a lot of reasons why. I talked about some of them, but a lot of reasons why I ended up coming back and became involved with them, became a partner at Fresh Hospitality, which was at the time a very early stage. I think we had across the whole portfolio maybe 6 or 10 restaurants, and today we have over 200, probably 225 restaurants or something like that. So it was early stage, and we set out to basically invest in. There was this new thing in the restaurant scene called fast casual, which was and now it's pretty prominent, right? Chipotle kind of popularized it, but it was in 2011, and people had sort of heard of it, but it wasn't nearly as big. And so we said, hey, this is a really fast-growing segment of the restaurant industry, and we see a number of opportunities to invest in a couple different companies in that bucket, and then build some infrastructure to support all the companies that we invest in. And so that was really, we started deploying capital into a number of different businesses. Tzatziki's, which is one of our largest portfolio companies, was one of the first investments. I'm trying to think of some of the other early ones. Martin's Barbecue is one of the early ones, which has been one of our
incredible,
really good ones. And then over time, we added Biscuit Love and Grilled Cheesery and some other great concepts. And the cool thing is, I mean, we've invested in some great companies and they've done really well, but really the magic of what we've done is we built this infrastructure. We built a platform that helps, and it's a lot very similar in some ways to kind of what you guys are doing. Right?
Yeah,
we've talked about that.
Yeah.
And I picked your brain about all the cool strategies.
Yeah,
that you guys have.
and I need to spend more time picking your brain about them because I mean, what you guys have built is unbelievable.
And so we have, I mean, we provide capital to grow these restaurant brands, but the capital is not really the value add. We have this whole ecosystem. So we have a technology company, which is one of the businesses that I'm the most engaged in. We have a technology company. We have a real estate development company. We have an accounting firm. We have a marketing company. We have all these businesses. And so when we invest in somebody, we plug them into this whole infrastructure and we say, okay, you're an entrepreneur with, let's say, 1 or 2 restaurant locations. You're trying to do everything yourself. Well, we're going to do all the accounting. We're going to do all of the real estate. We're going to do, all the marketing. We're going to do all the technology. What you focus on is your food and your guests and the experience of what the brand is going to be. Mm-hmm. And so, and the reality is 95% of the people in the restaurant industry, it's the same as the music industry, right? They're creatives.
That's right.
And that's why that's part of the reason there's such a high failure rate is everybody has a passion or a dream of, I want to make my mom's like favorite dish and all this stuff, right? And it's still a business.
Yeah.
And so we found a really nice fit with the market where tons and tons of restaurateurs have a great concept, but they're losing money or they don't know how to manage it, or it's growing like crazy and they don't know what to do. And I'll tell you an anecdote about the founder of Tzatziki's. He had 3 restaurants. They were doing pretty well. He was making good money. He and his wife were running everything. He was running the 3 stores as best he could. She was doing all the bookkeeping and everything. They were just using cash registers, a completely paper-driven accounting, all this stuff, paper tickets, everything. Didn't have any point of sale system, didn't have any metrics, didn't have any analytics, any of that stuff. They had struggled for a long time to have children, and then they did IVF and they had twins, and then 18 months later they had another set of twins. So they went from 0 to 4 kids in about 18 months, and they were at an absolute breaking point, and the wheels were coming off basically. And so we said, hey, we'll get involved. And we, for the first 6 to 8 months, we didn't build any new stores. All we did is implement technology and systems and cost accounting and all this stuff. And we literally tripled the profitability of the business on the same number of stores.
Wow.
Just by putting in a point of sale, measuring everything, projecting, doing ideal versus actual forecasting, all this kind of stuff. And so that is that. And then we started to leverage that to then expand and build a company and all this stuff. So the platform is really where we generate most of the value for the companies that we invest in, and we've tried to structure it so that we deploy the capital, but really we just plug them into this whole infrastructure. Which is funny. We had a meeting. We had kind of a fresh-wide meeting a couple months ago, and I looked around the room, and I said to my dad, I was like, when we started, there was like 40 people in the room, and we knew like one of the people, right? I was like, when I came back, that person was like your buddy from back in the day, and everybody else is someone that we've brought in, recruited, built, hired, whatever, as part of this massive organization that we now have scaled a bunch of different companies out of.
So I have a design question,
okay.
And if it's a trade secret or if it.
I will answer any question if I can answer it.
Yes, exactly. So the question is about the relationship between Fresh and the founders that it goes into partnership with, right? And so there's different types of platforms, and I'll take 2 sort of examples. So if you look at Jumpstart Foundry, how that particular platform works is it takes a minority stake in a whole lot of companies, and then focuses around like strategy, network connections, not so much like operational stuff because it's a real like minority stake. And then I don't want to say we look at that investment as due diligence, but due diligence is a byproduct of that investment. You start to get to know the company better, and then based on their fit, their progress, and other things like that, then you can kind of go in and say, okay, well, we're going to double down and make a larger investment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so let's take AmSurge, for example. So AmSurge is like they have a full platform for operating ambulatory surgical centers. and they go in and they partner with the docs, and it's like a 51-49 type of model, right? And so it's much more engaged.
Yep.
Is there a standard model that you all take?
Yeah, I mean, we have rules of thumb. It's not, we don't have necessarily a fixed structure, but we're way on the AmSurge side of things. So we almost operate like a private, like a very small private equity firm.
That's what I figured. Like when you get in, We take
a majority stake. We get very involved. We're engaged in the company. We still want the founders if they want to. I mean, and from the early stages, I think it would almost be an investment requirement that the founder stays on and runs the company.
Right.
I mean, if they transition out after the organization becomes large enough, I think that's a natural progression. And works for some founders, may not work for everybody, but the general structure is definitely majority stake. That's one of our requirements. And then very hands-on, and really we want to give the founders the framework and the infrastructure to be able to scale, but on a day-to-day basis, we have some stuff that we're super opinionated about, and we're going to be very vocal about, and we're going to tell you exactly how it needs to be done.
Yep.
But that stuff is like the technology package, the accounting platform,
it's operating stuff,
how the capital is used, those kinds of things. We're very easy to work with and very flexible on most stuff. Like if you want to change some stuff on your menu, if you want to, if you have a new idea, I mean, we encourage and want the founders to do that stuff. That's why we want to partner with them and where we think they can add the value. And what we are just very opinionated about. Okay, if you're, you need to be using these cost controls and looking at these metrics and that kind of stuff.
So, okay, on that topic, do the founders see this as an exit? If you're coming in to take a majority, like how do they?
It's not a hard and fast rule, but I would say almost on principle, don't cash out when we don't cash the founders out.
Got it. Okay, so the idea here is more. This is like a market problem that you all are solving. Generally speaking, the food entrepreneurs who have started these businesses, their strength is going to be in the creative aspects of it, and and often maybe also the experiential things as well. Oh yeah,
that's a huge piece of it. Yeah, the brand, the experience.
Yeah, and that may work really well for one place. Once you start getting into 2, 3, 4, 5, it's just a market problem. You need infrastructure.
There's like a rule of thumb in the restaurant industry that no human can operate just running themselves more than 3 restaurants.
Got it.
And like most people will tap. Some people, I mean, and 3 is the max, right? Like some people tap out at 1.
Yeah.
Some people can't even run 1, right? But the most talented manager, without having general managers and assistants and stuff, the most talented manager can run 3 restaurants if they're working 80 hours a week or 100 hours a week and scrambling around and doing everything they can do. But that is, so you see even really successful brands where the founder doesn't have either the ability or the capital or the wherewithal or whatever to start building a team and start scaling themselves out, they hit this ceiling. And so sometimes they hit it at 1 store, a lot of people hit it at 3 stores, but that's the sweet spot where they say, the person who wants to work with us is somebody who says, hey, I know this is a great concept. I know I can grow it. I know I am not the one who can take it to the next level.
Yep.
I need infrastructure and support to be able to do that.
Yep.
And that's the problem we solve. And so it's funny because sometimes people will ask us like, oh, well, how hard is it to convince these owners to have you invest and to give up a majority of their company? And like, we're turning people down every single day. Like, we're not struggling. Like it's not even a sales pitch. It's literally the opposite. It's like, I can't do that this many of these. Like I need to stop doing it.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was picking up on is that, it feels like it's a dynamic in the market where there's probably opportunities for more fresh.
Oh yeah, and it's weird because
businesses, if anything,
we've looked across the country and we haven't really found any organization that really pursues quite the same business model that we have.
Yeah, it feels like you guys, and I'm sure you'll tell me a million differences. I'm the person who doesn't really know anything.
I think it's probably an accurate analogy.
But as a layman, it feels like you're taking sort of that big fast food model and you've brought it down to fast casual, more localized. Brands that were started and that people have authentic relationships with, like Martin's.
Exactly.
Martin's is people have authentic relationships with that brand.
Yeah.
Taziki's as well, right? So these are like homegrown brands. People know the story, they know the people. You see Pat Martin at all these different festivals with this big barbecue pit, right? And so these are real people. It's not like McDonald's, but when you look at what's behind it, what you've built out, the infrastructure behind it, it does, it's not 100% that, but it's
fun. It's funny because we try to systemize the back end so much that we can almost move a manager from one week. So in the restaurant industry, you call them concepts. That's just what it is.
Okay.
So like Martin's is a concept. Tazik's is a concept.
Got
That's
it.
just like a term of art.
That's a term.
Term of art in the industry.
Term.
But sometimes that confuses people. So when we move a manager from one concept to another, it's almost seamless. They just have to learn a few of the nuances because the back end is completely the same.
Right.
Right. All the reporting's the same.
Right.
The tools are the same. The systems are the same. And so we have this, I envision it sort of in my head as like this grid that like everything sits on top of, and everything is its own unique special flower, but underneath it's the exact same root system that is supporting everything.
Was the founding team you, your father...
Me, my dad, my brother, and a guy named Nick Pahakis, who's a restaurateur based out of Birmingham.
Got it. Tell me, like, what did each person bring to the team? I'm really interested. They recruited you, and they didn't just want you because you were the son and brother. They wanted you for a specific strength that you brought to the table. And I've got a sense of what that is, just sort of knowing you a little bit. But I'd love to hear, like, who did what?
So I would say Nick was definitely the culinary guy. He's he was like the true food guy.
Okay.
I would say my dad is the like ops guy, so he understands the operations at a
decades of experience
level.
In the trenches.
Like,
yes.
Yeah, he's absolutely the operating guy. My brother is more of kind of like the real estate guy, some financial experience.
Okay.
And then my background, my experience is more around like strategy, marketing, PR, all that kind of stuff. Like when no one had heard of any of the stuff that Fresh was doing or had been doing or whatever, and I set out in this kind of systematic multi-year campaign, and a lot of it was like fumbling around in the dark for years and years, but to figure out, okay, let's get our name out there. We're doing all this cool stuff, and like nobody's heard of us. Nobody knows what we're doing. Nobody knows that. And today even we could do a much better job. Like most people, and we go back and forth about whether we want people to know that like Martin's and Vui's are both Fresh restaurants, right?
Yeah. It feels to me like you guys are still not totally comfortable being like on Front Street. Like you want the concepts to kind of breathe.
We do want them.
As
we want them to stand on their own. You know what I mean? But I kind of, my perspective was more around like marketing, strategy, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of marketing for Fresh, like not marketing for Martin's and Tazik's, I know that you've got a marketing company, and but like in terms of marketing for Fresh, what will be the objective of building awareness around Fresh? What does that do for you? You already said you're turning down concepts. Is it because you could always have better entrepreneurs bringing better concepts, and you would just like to have a better beacon for that?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, and maybe there's a third piece as well. But and again, this is in 2011. We didn't have people banging down the door to do deals with us. So it took some time to kind of build up the deal flow. But I would say if I zoom out and think about what is my actual role, right? What is my job? I think it's basically the same thing as anybody who's a partner at a private equity firm, right? Which is basically I do two things. I source deals, right, and invest in them, and then I add value to the companies that we've already invested in. You know that extremely well, right?
Get it.
Yeah, you get it. And so if you look at both of those things, in my opinion, having a good PR profile or having a good brand presence, whatever, amplifies both of those, right? So if you're known, if people respect you and like you, and you have a good brand, then people are more likely to bring you deals and want to do deals with you. And so even if you're winnowing down and only wanting to be really selective about opportunities, which you should be anyway, especially if you're pursuing a more concentrated approach, PR helps that, brand expansion helps that. And then the second piece is adding value. Getting PR for Fresh helps flow down and get PR for all of our brands.
Yeah, right.
And so the end goal at the end of the day is to get more people to eat at those restaurants. And so if PR for Fresh can help that in some way, then that's great. And the third piece of that, maybe there's two other like kind of ancillary pieces. I'd say those are the two big pillars. But the third piece would be kind of access or just opportunities in terms of whether it's putting a deal together, whether it's getting a first look at something, you know what I mean? All of these kind of intangibles that come out of that. And then the last piece would be, if you have any kind of platform, there's opportunities that may not be omnipresent. They may not always be there, but there's opportunities to monetize in unique ways that, again, whether it's just access to something, whether it's, hey, we have all these people who want to do business with us. Like, what are some other ways we can add value to them, even if we don't invest in them?
Right.
And so that's what we started thinking about. And we have a technology company that, as I said earlier, is like one of the areas where I spend a lot of my time. And that company services all the Fresh restaurants, which is 225 units or something like that. But we have almost 5,000 customers that are beyond that. And so the inbound deal flow that we get from Fresh may not be a Fresh investment, but it's, hey, can we get them on our technology stack? Hey, can we do some real estate development work for them? Hey, you know what I mean? So starting to leverage now the infrastructure and point it out and say, hey, can we scale these infrastructure companies as standalone businesses as well?
Makes a ton of sense. So let's pivot into the science of success. So, and this is not a Fresh project.
No, totally unrelated, which is strange. Yes.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time.
Yeah. But that's cool though. I mean, I actually think it's really helpful to have something that's a little more than a hobby. Right?
Yep.
For an entrepreneur, if you're a creative entrepreneur, I think it's good to have something that's a little more than a hobby.
A podcast.
It's actually a podcast, right? That's like not even really related to your primary business because, it stimulates your brain. You're learning about things from different perspectives. There's all these things you can bring back into the core business,
that's the
right?
Real value add,
yeah,
right?
There's a million things you can bring back in that if you're just always here in the business, you just can't do, right?
Yep.
So talk to me about what was the genesis of the science of success.
So I'll try to truncate this long Genesis story, but basically the show started out on a beach in Puerto Rico in, when was it? 2015, I think, was originally, maybe. I'd have to go look at the date, but it started out on a beach in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
I was on vacation there with my wife and one of her best friends and her best friend's boyfriend at the time.
Okay.
And I was reading a book. I think it was Start With Why. And
okay. Good book.
Simon Sinek. Yeah, just reading that. Classic read. And sitting there, and this guy had just started a company, and he was asking me all these questions, and I started talking to him, and we got into tons of different business concepts and started digging into psychology and all this stuff. And so the pretext for that is I've always been super into personal development, and for example, Warren Buffett is somebody that I've studied really deeply, right? And similar to when I kind of taught myself an MBA, basically reading a suitcase full of books to get a job on Wall Street. When I was like, hey, I'm an investor fundamentally, which is what my role at Fresh is. I want to study the greatest investor of all time. So I've read pretty much everything that's been written by or about Warren Buffett, and also his business partner, Charlie Munger, and all this stuff. So I go super deep into topics and study them. And so I've always been a personal development nerd. And so I read all this stuff, and on this conversation on the beach in Puerto Rico, we started talking about this wide-ranging spectrum of things from mindset to psychology to business strategy and all this stuff. And he was like, dude, can you just put all this stuff in a PowerPoint and share it with my team? And I was like, okay, sure, we can do that. And so I was like, I'd never done anything like that, but I'd be down to do it. So I made this PowerPoint. We presented it to his whole executive team, and it was really fun. I had a great time. I enjoyed it. And then I did nothing with that PowerPoint for probably 6 months.
Okay.
Just sat on the shelf, didn't get looked at or used or whatever. And then I was talking to somebody who was basically a coach of mine at the time. I don't know if we could talk about coaching if you want to dig into it or not, but I'm a big fan of it. And so this guy was a coach of mine basically, and he was like, and I mentioned it, and he was like, dude, why don't you do some more with that? And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And he was like, you have all these other like business partners and friends and all these people who could be benefiting from that, and you're not sharing it with them. And so I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, but I don't want them to think I'm a weirdo.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to talk about like your subconscious limiting beliefs and all this stuff and then be like, oh my God, he's off his rocker. Like, it's like, I just want to have a very like formal professional relationship with all my business partners. Whatever. Right. And he's like, I think you should try and share it with them. So I started on this quest and shared this deck with a bunch of my business partners and associates and all this stuff. And then I started sharing it with friends, and I shared it with a friend of mine who had a website at the time that was this website called redorbit.com. Probably would have.
I remember Red Orbit.
Do you know Sam Savage? I don't know if you know.
I don't know Sam Savage,
okay.
but I know Red Orbit. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So redorbit.com, it's like a kind of a small science news website.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, okay.
It was based in, I think it's still based in Nashville. He sold it, but anyway, he was like, dude, this stuff is cool, but like, I want to create a podcast on our website, and I think you should be the host and talk about all this stuff.
Okay.
And I was like, dude, I don't know anything about podcasting. Like, I still don't know anything. Like, I don't even know what brand of microphone I have. Like, I don't know how to plug the stuff in. I don't know do any of it. Right. And I was like, but I can talk about it. So if you want to have me talk about it and you do all the editing and marketing and all this other stuff, I can come and record myself talking about it. So that's how we launched. We recorded 6 episodes and we launched on redorbit.com. We did all this testing on AdWords and stuff. I had like 50 titles, and Science of Success came back the best title. And so, like, the most responded ad or whatever. And so that's what we rolled with. And we launched it in the fall of, I think it was the fall of 2016. Yeah, that makes sense. 3 years. No. Fall of 2015? I don't know. We've done 200 episodes. We do an episode a week, so that's got to be 4 years, right? Yeah. Okay.
And you've now kicked up to 2 episodes a week, right?
Yeah, so we're starting to do that, which we can get into.
Yeah.
And I explained my reasoning for that, too. But so we do it. I got to check my math on this, but we do it 4 years, basically.
Yeah.
So we launched in the fall. I remember the first episode went live. It was actually almost to like, it was like early November.
Okay.
So it was very similar to when we're recording this. I don't know when this will air, but and it got a couple thousand downloads over, the first month or two. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, this is great. And I remember in my year-end recap or my goals, I think we had 13,000 downloads cumulatively across the show.
Okay.
And I was super psyched about that and was really pumped. And then in sort of early January, we hit this we got on New and Noteworthy and hit this like much larger growth trajectory. And then by probably mid-year 2016, we were hitting like 10,000 downloads an episode, and so it really started to kind of clip up, and the show was going really well. I was really excited about everything that was happening, and then my business partner, basically the guy who owned the website, sold the website, and in the selling of the website, the podcast basically just went away. Like, I lost my distribution. I lost the guy who was editing it. The show, wasn't part of the transaction or whatever. So it just kind of fell out.
Wow.
And he basically went dark on me. And I was like, hey, dude. And he's like, oh, yeah, here's the iTunes login. Like, let me know, if you need anything else. So the show went off the air for like a couple weeks. And I just got this notice from iTunes or whatever that, it wasn't being published and all these things. And I was like, oh my God, like, what's happening? And so I had to take the whole show. And my buddy was like, look, man, I know we were like partnered in this. He's like, just take the whole thing. Like, I don't even want to mess with it. And so I basically took it over, and I had to figure out, how do I edit it? How do I post it? How do I do all this stuff? And so it took me like a couple weeks to get everything squared away, but I built this whole process and we've refined it and tweaked it. And now I have an audio engineering team and an assistant and a graphic designer and all these people. And it forced me into this position where I basically developed the whole system, right? So the show is completely automated other than the actual interviews, where everything happens without me now that I've kind of crafted this.
Yeah.
And over time, I'll pick up responsibilities and then I'll kind of offload them into the structure of the system.
Yeah.
But then that was one of the big turning points where I was like, okay, now I have to figure the show out on my own. And having everything get shut down and all this stuff. And actually, like, right after we came back, I also got banned from iTunes for breaking the terms of service, because I'd read this article about and this is one of the reasons the show started getting more popular, but I'd read this article about, I didn't know, it didn't say anything in the article that it was like a
dark hat.
Yeah. Like a tactic that you're not supposed to use.
Yeah.
But, gray hat tactics or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was like iTunes SEO kind of, which is, it still works today,
Still
but
works.
if you get caught, you'll get banned.
Yeah.
And so we got banned for doing it and then had to stop doing it. And so all these kind of setbacks, but then we started rolling, and the early episodes of the show. So it's kind of a weird thing, and I've thought about almost recording like a little preamble or something for the first episode for people, because people, when they listen to a podcast, I've found, and this is just anecdotal, but I've have thousands of listeners, so I feel like I've got a reasonable understanding of it. People will do one of two things. They either just go from newest to oldest, or they go from oldest to newest.
I'm an oldest. No, that's not right. I'm a newest to oldest.
I'm a newest to oldest.
I'm a newest
too.
to oldest.
Yeah, I never go back to the first episode.
Yeah,
but
no, I'm a newest to oldest.
I get emails all the time. People are like, hey, I went back and started with the first episode, and I'm like, I'm sorry for the early episodes. Like,
I know.
We really get a lot better if you stick with it.
Right.
Like, that's what I say to everybody.
Right.
And but the first probably 6 episodes are just me talking. So it's like 15 minutes of just Matt. Like,
oh, I need to go back and listen to that.
So the first 6 topics are the big 6 topics.
Those are the deck.
From the deck. Yeah, it's
I've
the deck.
got to go listen to
Right?
that.
So it's
that's amazing.
It's like dealing with setbacks and all this other stuff. So the first 6 episodes are the deck, and then I never thought of doing an interview, and this is before we parted ways with Red Orbit, but the producer or one of the I don't know what is the editor at Red Orbit was like, hey, these guys pitched us a book. They wanted to write an article about it on redorbit.com, and the book was called 2 Awesome Hours, and it was a pretty good book. I mean, I hadn't heard of it before then, but I read it. It was great, and he was like, do you want to interview the author for the podcast? And I was like, sure, whatever, yeah. Like, we'll interview him.
Yeah.
You know, we don't really know what we're doing, so we'll just interview this guy.
Uh-huh.
And so we interviewed him, and his name was Josh, but I forget his last name, because we have a lot of Joshes on the show. But anyway, so we interviewed him, and that was the first interview show that we ever did. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if we should do like more interviews. And so I had a few just friends and connections and people that had, whether they were like kind of small influencers or authors in the personal development space or whatever. And we started to cobble together, small-ish guests, maybe some medium name guests, but no like big heavy hitters and stuff. And then I'm happy to share the roadmap or the strategy for how we've been able to get more well-known people. But it was, it just took time and a mix of boldness and luck and persistence and strategy.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely true that, at least it's been my experience, that as the consistency helps. When you say you've done a number of episodes, okay, that's a credibility boost.
Yeah.
And then, it's like when you've had enough credible people before, other people feel like it goes from being less of a risk to an opportunity for them,
yeah,
right? You know what I mean?
yeah.
And so that's
the big piece of it.
Yeah, there's definitely a thing where you just have to keep doing it, keep doing it.
I would say the single biggest driver of us being able to get guests is social proof, right? So having previous guests that they've heard of, or that are semi well known in their space. Because if you say, well, hey, Grant Cardone and all these other people were on your podcast, like then you say, or Carol in the psychology world, like if you say, hey, Carol Dweck's been on the show and Phil Zimbardo and all these like famous psychologists have been on the show, and you're a reasonably successful psychologist with like a book that's doing well right now, you'd be like, wow, like those people are the eminent people in my field, like, and they've done this, like I need to do that to be part of that peer group.
And this is an amazing opportunity. Like
exactly.
I'm psyched to do it. Like it's not just like I need to do it. It's like, oh my gosh, I get to do this. This is great. This is gonna be great for me. That's awesome, man. Dude, you're like one of the smartest people I know.
That's a massive compliment, because I feel like you know a lot of people and you're also very smart. So
you're definitely one of the smartest people I know. When we got together for coffee, it was different than the first time we met. I feel like the first time we met, I don't know, we were just like,
we
hey,
didn't really
who
know
are
each
you?
other.
Yeah.
We were both like didn't know each other,
and we didn't have social proof either for each other.
That's
I don't
right.
think, you know what I mean. So I think there was more of a not only who are you, but like, okay.
I was more of like a young upstart, and you were like more successful, I think. And so you were probably like, who's this punk? Like,
I don't know about that, but I mean, it definitely was not the same. And in this meeting, it was definitely much more like peers. And I don't do as well with taking notes. Like, look, you've got your book and your pen.
I'm getting interviewed, and I literally brought a notebook. I just like to be able to.
Yeah, like I wouldn't even thinking about that, but it's just like, do you burn out at all in terms of like processing information and like do you have like energetic times where like you have to just like turn it down? I mean, I feel like when I'm talking to you, my brain activity is like at a pretty high level, and I can hang even better now that like I don't drink, and like I like right now I'm fasting, so like that helps.
I'm fasting too.
Great, like that helps. Those things help, right?
Yep.
But I need to take like a week where it's not like a vacation week. It's just kind of like a dumb week.
Yeah,
like I'm just like letting my subconscious kind of like Like,
you gotta clear the space.
Yeah.
My brain is like overclocked.
Dude, that's okay. You are saying what I feel like when I'm with you. Like, so you are overclocked, man.
There's two pieces.
But hold on, really quickly.
Yeah.
Can we just give context for people who don't know what overclocking is?
Okay. So I don't even know if I can describe it very well, but basically overclocking is a computer. Like, you crank it beyond what the settings are supposed to let you crank it to like perform at like a higher level.
And it could burn the motherboard out.
Yes, exactly. And it's like kind of dangerous to the
computer. Right.
Yes, exactly. So my brain is overclocked.
Yeah.
But like there's two kind of outputs to that. One is I have an insatiable need to fill my brain with information. So I literally I don't get burnt. I mean, maybe I'd reach the threshold at some point, but like I rarely ever get burnt out on consuming stuff. And it's almost problematic for my wife because I will listen to an audiobook or a podcast or something, like any single space of activity. Like I probably need more space of just like thinking without input.
Yeah.
If I'm brushing my teeth, I'm listening to an audiobook. If I'm dry, you know what I mean? Every single free moment, if I'm taking out the trash, I will play an audiobook for 1 minute and 27 seconds because otherwise that's wasted time.
Yep.
And so I'm always inputting stuff. And then the other piece of that is like, and this is something that I don't know how to solve it other than like the podcast is a good way to solve it. But like I literally have so much stuff that I've accumulated because like one of the most interesting things about knowledge is the more you know, the more you can know.
Yeah,
and actually one of my favorite
it has compounding
impacts.
I know.
And so like knowledge gives more like structure and context for more knowledge to glom onto. And so I encounter all the time, whether it's like my niece or people with the podcast or like listeners who email me questions or like a business partner that I'm dealing with, like I have so much just stuff that I've interviewed these people, I've read all this stuff, I've practiced all these things, and it's like I want to download like 45 hours of information into your brain right now, and I can't do it. Like the channel isn't wide enough. You know what I mean? Like I can only give you like whatever 100 words a minute, and like I want like a fiber optic thing where I can just give you like hundreds and hundreds of pieces of knowledge.
Well, you're living in the right era because it's probably around the corner.
Neuralink, man.
It's probably around the corner.
I gotta get plugged in.
What role does mindfulness and meditation play in your life?
Huge role. I meditate every single day. Yeah.
How long? I just hit day 201.
Nice.
Straight.
That's awesome.
Here's the thing. Like, it's like there's kind of like mindfulness snobs out there. Like, you're doing that, you're doing this. I feel like I got a little discouraged there for a minute listening to Naval, because he was like, these apps, screw these apps. You need to just do it on your own. And then I'm like,
do whatever works.
I'm
for
about
you.
efficacy. I'm like, does it work? Okay, I'm doing it. Screw you for the most part. So I use Calm.
Okay.
And it's great. It's 10 to 12 minutes a day. Like, what's your practice like?
So my practice is, and it's been a little disrupted. Like I've still been able to meditate every day, but it's been disrupted in terms of the timing, the cadence, because we just had a baby like a month ago, basically.
Understood.
But the typical cadence is first thing when I get up in the morning. Now it's probably like 45 minutes after I get up.
Okay.
But really before I do any work-related stuff, I meditate. And I've experimented with a dozen different meditation methods. I've done guided, unguided, visualization, breathing, all kinds of different stuff. And there's my current practice, and I'm sure if you ask me in 6 months, it'd probably be different. But my current practice is kind of two main things. The first is borrowed from a guy named Dan Siegel, Dr. Dan Siegel. He's at Harvard Medical School, psychologist. Crazy smart guy. Like he was on The Science of Success, and when I interviewed him, literally I was thinking to myself, I was like, this guy is insanely smart. Like I want to go and spend time with him because whatever he has going on is really, really smart about mindfulness and all this stuff. And he's done some really cool studies about it and stuff. But he has this method called the Wheel of Awareness that is I just tried it out because after I interviewed him, I was like, dude, I got to try this guy's stuff. And so I tried it out, and I was like, this is really cool. And it just for whatever reason, that methodology resonated with me. Now, someone else might do it and be like, that methodology sucks.
Yeah.
But it's all about figuring out what methodology works.
Yeah.
And so I borrowed a piece from that, which is basically I start out with just a 5 senses awareness. So I just listen for a minute, and I'm not timing it. So I just have my eyes closed, but I listen for a minute-ish. I see for a minute. So even with my eyes closed, you still see, right? So sometimes I'll open my eyes. If I'm out in nature or something, I love to, I was doing this crazy waterfall rappelling thing in Nashville 2 months ago, and it was beautiful, and it was a quiet morning, and I had 15 minutes, and I just sat on a rock and stared at the woods for 15 minutes because it was so you can meditate with your eyes open.
That's right.
So there's a minute of visual, and then a minute of smell, a minute of taste, a minute of touch, right? And so that helps me ground myself in my body. And then that's borrowed from the Wheel of Awareness, which has some other parts too that I don't do every time anymore, but I still like the other parts of it. And then now what I've been doing recently, is trying to, and this comes from a guy named Gay Hendricks, who's been on the show a couple times.
Okay.
And his biggest book is called The Big Leap.
Okay.
And it's all about overcoming self-sabotage.
Okay.
And kind of moving through what he calls our upper limit problems with everything, right? So happiness, wealth, all this stuff. And so I've been doing this meditation where I view it as almost like a flame or like a little candle. I try to find like a positive feeling or emotion in my like experience, and I try to just experience that for as long as I can and keep like kind of like fanning the flame and like letting it build. And then like if I get distracted or whatever, I just come back to it and like fan it and like build it again. And I like it just because when I end like I've literally ended a meditation and just been like smiling like ear to ear, like feeling amazing.
Yeah.
And that method for whatever, it just feels good to me. And the idea of the practice is like, it's like building, like, anything, right? Get reps, build a muscle, but like build the muscle of experiencing positive emotion. Because a lot of times, and this is one of the roots of self-sabotage, is we have a happiness thermostat. And when we trip over it, we do something, we say something, to somebody, or we're mean to someone, or we stub our toe, or, I mean, there's a million different ways, but like we don't subconsciously feel like we deserve to be as happy as we are. And so we do whatever we can to reset our happiness. And people do it with money, they do it with wealth, they do it with all kinds of things, but like reset our happiness back to where we feel it should be. And so I'm trying to push myself to be happier and experience more positive emotion. And so every time I experience a negative emotion, that's a trigger to say like, well, what positive emotion is trying to break through that I'm like, creating a worry about to try and bury or hide or not experience.
I need to try both of those. After this,
I'll send you some stuff.
Yeah. After this, you send me some stuff, and then I'll also put this in show notes and things like that. Yeah. That's dope, because one of the things that I've now figured out, being in like, my 200s, right, of doing it every day, is I'm so far past the like meditating well kind of thing. And like I'm
dude, I have terrible meditation sessions.
Yeah, like I'm understanding the practice part of it now, and like the observer thing becomes much clearer when you do it 100+ days in a row, because it's like, oh, it's just me paying attention to all this crazy shit, and like there's a world inside of me that like I actually can turn on, turn off, manipulate. Like it's affecting me, and when I'm not aware of it, it's affecting me, and it's just this awareness of like this whole mystery that is inside of each one of us that nobody has figured out yet, right? You know what I mean? Nobody has figured this out, but we get glimpses of it, and we're like, hey, I don't really understand why this works, but it works. So we'll just pass it on and keep trying to like learn about it. And to me, that's, at least at this point in my journey with meditation, like that's kind of what it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes is, and I don't know who it's attributable to, but it's meditation is the return to breath, right? And so, I mean, obviously that's more in the context of mindfulness, but it's the idea of like, it's not sitting there with no thoughts in your brain for 20 minutes, right? And everyone thinks that's what it is, and so they do it, and then like, oh, I couldn't meditate, I can't do it, and they give up. Or they're like, oh yeah, I just started thinking about all this stuff, and it's like, well, the whole point is to recognize that you're doing that, and then just try to pull back. And then you get distracted again, and you start thinking about work, and you start, like, a subtle shift that I've made recently in the way that I characterize my own mental activities is instead of saying that and I'll give you an example of it, but like instead of saying that I'm thinking about work, I just say that I'm working. And this, like, I'll contextualize this. So like if I'm meditating and I start thinking about like, okay, like who am I meeting with today? Like what do I have to do? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, I'm working. Like stop working and just meditate. Right. Or like I'll think about, like, I play a lot of video games, which, with work and life and kids and everything else, like less now, but like to play video games. And so sometimes I'll be meditating. I'll be like thinking about a game, or like, well, I really want to do this, I want to do that, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, I'm playing games right now, I'm not meditating, right? So it's like, instead of saying I'm thinking about work or I'm thinking about playing a game, it's like I'm doing it. You're doing it. And,
right? And that's really the truth.
Yeah,
that's really the truth.
Right?
It is, yeah. And for me, sometimes like it provides clarity on what's really important. Like I'll be sitting there in a meditation session, and like my goal is to return to the breath.
Yep.
But the things that pop up, and when they pop up, and I kind of go, okay, I'm going along for that ride,
Yep.
And then like 30 seconds later, I realize I'm on the ride,
Yep.
and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go return to the breath, but I'm making a note. I'm sticking a pin in that because, like, that's a thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a thing because I was having just a final time in my breath, and I let that thought take me for 30 seconds.
Yeah,
and there's something to that, right? You know what I mean? Like, I have to address that in some way, shape, or form.
That's totally true. And I think even a extrapolation on that is that a lot of times for me, meditation, like most of my insights from meditation in a weird way don't actually come from when I'm meditating. It comes from the awareness that is created from meditation. And so and you might have this experience too, but it's
this is the thing. This is why I do it now. I don't do it for the session.
Yeah,
I do it for what it's
like when you're in your day, in your life, you can start to see, oh, why am I reacting this way? Like my emotions are changing. Like I'm getting angry or I'm being foolish or like, you start to see your thoughts and your behavior in a more detached way. And then you can start to, adjust it and make it more kind of what you want it to be.
It's the closest I've been to mastering how I engage with the world.
Yeah.
Right. In real time. Like time slows down because like when the thing comes up, it's like I know how to look at it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like, and it's
That's
sneaky.
Exactly
it's sneaky because the point is when you don't meditate, you don't give yourself any practice time to see it coming. It's like you can't see it coming.
You're just in it.
You're just in it.
You can't zoom out.
You're in it. You're feeling it, and then you're along for the ride. You don't even know what it's like to stop and look at it and still see it happening. It's still happening, but you're not along for the ride, or you can't actually return to breath and say, "You are totally cool to do that, but I'm going here." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That practice.
Yeah.
So that's been huge for me, man.
That to me is the biggest benefit. It's not like I had somebody, one of the things we talk, meditation is probably the single most recommended strategy from the podcast. Like hands down, if you just looked at a number of things guests recommend, that is easily at the top of the list. And I had a listener email me, this is probably a couple months ago at this point, and say, one of the things I say is like, if you want to uncover the limiting beliefs that are holding you back, meditation's a great tool because, right, it gives you the visibility into what your thought patterns are. And they're like, well, they say this thing is like, hey, whenever I meditate, like I can't really, I don't see any limiting beliefs coming up. And I was like, well, they don't come up when you meditate.
Right.
You meditate so that when they come up, you're aware of them.
That's it.
And so like you're in the situation and you tell yourself right before the meeting, you're like, oh, I shouldn't be the one to present this or whatever it is, right? And then it's like, whoa, what was that? Right.
Right.
Like you see this.
Yes.
You see this thought flitter by that before would have just shaped your behavior, or you just hear it, and then you're like, what was that thought? Like, and then you can start to like, the more you do it, and you probably having this experience too, is like, you start to be like, whose thought is that? Right? Like I can now, it's literally like, oh, that's my mom. Like I can hear my mom's thought. Like I almost hear it in her voice. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks mom. But like, that's not what I'm gonna do. Like, you know what I mean?
Dude, we're at time.
Oh, devastating.
Yeah, I know, but that just means we'll have to do a part 2.
I'm happy to do a part 2.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to have part 2s next year because I got to figure out what I'm going to do next year, and I don't want it to just be a whole bunch of new guests. I think some of it's going to be continuations.
I'm happy to continue the exploration.
Man, this has been fantastic. I'm so happy that we got reconnected through this world of podcasting. And
me too. And you're coming on our show too, right?
I am.
I'm
excited. Yeah, I have no idea when these two shows will.
It's on the schedule, I'm pretty sure.
It's this month.
Oh, is it? Okay, nice.
Yeah, I think it's like 2 weeks from now, Tuesday.
See, I don't even know.
I've been living in my calendar, so I've been like really paying attention to when things are. It's like at noon, I think, maybe even the 26th, maybe even the day before.
That sounds right.
2 days before Thanksgiving.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm excited, man.
Awesome,
it's
bro.
Be awesome. Dude,
it's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, the Science of Success podcast. Seriously, I'm not even kidding. Like, it is one of my top 5 podcasts that I listen to. So you need to go subscribe. And then anywhere else people can find you online?
Successpodcast.com is the website for the show. And I read and respond to every single listener email. So if you want to ask me a question about anything we talked about or anything on the show at all, just shoot me an email. I give my email away on every episode.
That was like listening to the podcast because he says that exact same thing in the podcast that exact same way. That's a professional podcaster for you. So, Matt, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Marcus. I really appreciate it.
Peace.